Fine. So today we've over the past 3 sessions, we've looked at R and R Studio. We've looked at R Studio basics. We've tried to understand the 4 quadrants and their functions. We've tried to look at the principles of functions and objects and operators, tidy data in R Studio. And then we've looked at the 6 steps of data management process or data analysis. And we define those 6 steps as number 1, exploration, number 2, cleaning, number 3, manipulation or what we call wrangling, number 4, data description and summarization, number 5, data visualization, and number 6, data analysis. We've done the first 4. Today we're at number 5, data visualization. I hope we have been able to follow methodically how we have gone from number 1 up to number 4, and then we're going to do number 5 today. So data visualization in R just has to do with being able to reproduce your data, your manipulated data into graphics. And it's really, really interesting when you begin to see the graphical representation of your data, because that's when you begin to appreciate what data analysis you are doing, because visuals are very, very enlightening. They open up the eyes of your understanding of the data sets and all the data set is all about. So, but before we go into R visualization, there is some concept I need us to have in mind. So if you can see my screen, let me increase it a bit. Okay, so my screen, can you see the Word document on my screen?
Yes, please.
Awesome.
Yes, we can see.
So, you know, we mentioned in the early part of this training that there are basically 2 types of variables in statistics. I mean, 2 types of data. We have the categorical variables, we have the numerical variables. Those are 2 broad classifications of data. And the kind of variables that you have will actually determine what kind of graphical representation you plot. So this is just basically a summary of what to plot for what type of data. So let's go with the first one. If you have a single numerical data, usually the kind of plots that you can do is, the most common is a histogram, and then you have a density plot, and then you have a box plot. So these are the 3 things you can use to represent a single numerical variable. If you have 2 numerical variables, the usual thing to do is to plot a scatter plot. If it's 1 categorical variable, then you have what we call a bar plot or a bar chart. If you have 2 numerical variables, 2 or more categorical variables, you can use what we call either a stacked bar plot or a grouped bar plot or a percentage bar plot. Then, if you have 1 numerical and 1 categorical variable, like here, what you need is a density plot. If you have 2 categorical variables and 1 numeric, what you need is a density plot, and then you use the function we call facet wrap to represent the categorical variable. And then lastly, if you have 2 numerical variables and 1 categorical variable, you use a scatter plot, and then use the color color function to represent the categorical variables. So we'll see examples of these things. So let's move into our R environment. So can you see my R screen? Can you see my R screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Fine.
Yes, sir.
Oh, good. Awesome. So, like I said, today we're going to be doing data visualization. And in data visualization in R, there is a concept that has been developed called the grammar of graphics. Like I said, once you are able to understand the principles underlying this grammar of graphics, there is no graphical representation you cannot do in R. And so follow me very closely. Now, the grammar of graphics has three basic components. Number one is the data. Number two, Number two is the mapping, or what we call aesthetics. And then number three is the geometry. Now, I'm going to explain each of them. Now, when you are doing your graphical representation in R, you use the package we call ggplot, ggplot2. That's the package that we use. And luckily for us, this package, ggplot2, is contained within the TidyVerse package. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I said TidyVerse is useful because it's not just a package, it's a package containing other packages. So ggplot2 is one of the packages that TidyVerse contains. And ggplot2 is a package that helps us with graphical representation in R. Now, the function in ggplot2 that we use to do our graphical representation is called ggplot. Now, notice the package is ggplot2, the function is ggplot. So when we want to do a graphical representation in R, I said, first of all, we do the data, mapping, and geometry. Now, what R wants you to tell it first is what data sets are we using? That's not what number one is. Tell it what data set are we using. For example, if we're using the Star Wars data set, or we're using the M-Sleep, or whichever other data sets that we want to use, the first information R wants you to tell it is we're using this data set. That's number one. Number two, R wants you now to map the variables in that data set as aesthetics on a canvas or on a coordinate space. Now, I will explain what that means. Number three is the geometry, and the geometry is now actually the graphical representation itself. So it's like mapping is like having, you know, when artists do their work, they have a canvas on which they do their actual painting. So that canvas is number two, mapping, and that is where you tell R what you want on the coordinates of that map, of that canvas. For example, you tell R, I want this variable on the x-axis, I want this variable on the y-axis, I want this to be used to show the color, I want this to be used to show the shape. So that's what mapping essentially is. You describe to R what variables you want to represent on your canvas or on your coordinate space. And then number three, which is geometry, is now telling R exactly what painting you want. Do you want a bar chart? Do you want a histogram? Do you want a scatter plot? Do you want a box plot? So that's what geometry is. Geometry now tells R exactly what graph to put on that canvas, which is the mapping. So let's take them one after the other. So let's assume we're working on let's see, there is a database, a data set, sorry, called CO2. Sorry, CO2 in R. That's one of the data sets that we have access to. Like I told you, if you want to know what data sets you have access to, you just type data, open and close brackets, Control Enter, and then it gives you all the data sets that you have access to. You can see this one I'm highlighting. That's the CO2 data set. We have access to in R. And that's what I want to use to show us this example. Okay, so first of all, let's look at the CO2 data set, or let's call it here. So we say view CO2, control enter, and then it shows us what CO2 is. It has 5 variables. It has how many? 84 observations, or 84 rows and 5 columns. So now what we want to do is to, let's assume we want to plot a bar chart. You know, I told you if it's a single categorical variable, we use a bar chart. Now, this variable called treatment has 2 values in it. Let's look at it. Let's use the unique. Let's use unique. Sorry. CO2 $ treatments. Control enter. So you can see it tells us there are 2 unique values in treatments, non-chilled and chilled. So let's assume we want a bar chart to demonstrate that. So we start ggplot. We tell R, I said the first thing you do is to tell R what data set you're working on. So data equal to what? CO2. That's number 1. Number 2 is we tell R our mapping. You know what? Let me do it on the next line so that it's neater. So I go to the next line. I say mapping, right? Equal to, mapping works with a function we call aesthetic, so AES. And then mapping AES tells R what you want on your coordinate space. So we want to plot treatment. So X equal to treatment, right? And then the last thing I said we'll do is what? The geometry, sorry. So when you do this, you know, in TidyVerse, if you want to say pipe something into another thing, you use the pipe operator. In ggplot, the pipe operator is using your plus sign. So you write plus, and then you go to the next line, and then you write your geometry. So we said we want a bar chart. So bar chart is geom bar. So geom underscore bar. And then we open up our bracket. So if you see, we have done those 3 principles we mentioned about. We have told R the data set, data equal to CO2. We have told R the mapping, what we want on our x-axis, which is X equal to treatment here. And then we have told R the geometry, which is we want a bar chart, so geom bar. So if we click Control Enter here, you can see in the console, sorry, in the plot place, let me check this out. In the plot place here, it has given us, no, this is still covering. It has given us a bar chart with treatment on the x-axis here, and it has categorized non-chilled and chilled. I think they are the same frequencies of about 42 or thereabouts. So this is a bar chart. If you remember when I mentioned in the R basics, I told us that this plot here is used for R to show us whatever graphical representation we want. Okay, so this doesn't really give me a good picture of what I want us to do. So let me use the Star Wars data set, right? Let's look at the Star Wars data set. Star Wars, where are you? It's here. Okay, Star Wars. Right. Oh, no, not Star Wars. Let's use the let's use the msleep database. So let's call msleep view and msleep. So control enter. So that's the msleep database. Okay, so this category called var has like 4 unique values in it: canny, omni, heavy, and insecti. So let's use it and do our bar chart. So again, we say ggplot, and then we tell our data equal to, now we're using the msleep, comma, we go to the next line, and we say mapping equal to aesthetic, bracket open, then we put our var, and then at the end, we put our plus sign to show that we are piping it into our geometry, then our geom underscore bar. So I'll select it here, and then control enter. Okay, good. This is a nicer one. So you can see in this chart, it's a bar chart having var as our x variable, as our on the x-axis here, with the different unique values in var. You can see it's also added missing data here, NA, and then the count. So assuming we didn't want missing data to appear in this, we would have mentioned that earlier. Okay, so but this is just giving us a brief description of how to plot this thing using the 3 principles of the grammar of graphics. Okay, let's move one step further. Now I'm going to write this same code, ggplot, but instead of writing data equals, I'm just going to write msleep, because when you do this, R imagines already that the first information you want to give it is the data set. So it assumes that the first thing you would type here is the data set. So you don't actually need to type data equal to. So we do that, comma, we go to the next line. And then I could just go ahead and just write aesthetic var. And this is because R knows that the second thing after your data is the mapping. So you don't really need to write mapping equal to here. You can just go ahead and just write this aesthetic var here. And then you put in your plus sign and enter, and then you put in your geometry, geom bar for bar chart. And then if we click Control Enter, this gives us the same graph that we had in the initial time. Okay, so now what I wanted to bring out is you don't need to write data equal to, you don't need to write mapping equal to. You understand what I mean? Okay, so having done that, let's move a step higher. Now, you notice that here, we first write ggplot before we put in our data and mapping and stuff. That is working in the base R concept. If you're working in the TidyVerse way, you know, in the TidyVerse, you first start with your data set. So we'll do this, msleep, and then pipe operator, enter, then ggplot. Now, since we have already written our data set up here, we don't need to come back here and tell R again what data set, because this is being piped into ggplot. So we can skip this whole line because we already have msleep already as the beginning of our code. So we can just go straight to the second one and just write aesthetics var, and then plus, and then we write our geom bar. And then if we click Control Enter, it still gives us the same thing here. Okay, so now I mentioned that it's also still giving us our missing data. So we can remove missing data from here. So, and the beauty of using TidyVerse in with ggplot is you can do the manipulation of your data. Whatever manipulation you want to do that before you now pipe it into ggplot. If you use this concept above here, you have to do all those manipulations within ggplot, and it can become very messy. So first of all, using TidyVerse, manipulate your data to the extent you want, and then whatever resulting, you now pipe it into ggplot. So let's assume we didn't want to see missing data in VOR. So we pipe our msleep into drop NA VOR, since VOR we're working on, and then we use our pipe operator, and then we now we have told R we are working with msleep database, and then we pipe that into telling R that we want it to remove the missing data in the VOR variable before we now tell it to pipe it into ggplot. So if we do this and click Control Enter, if you look at the plot, here we have missing data NA. But when we run this command, Control Enter, you can see in the plot, we no longer have missing data. Now we only have the 4 main values in the VOR category. Now let me add something that is beautiful for us. Now you can see the way these things are arranged. Or let's use another variable so I can show you something. Msleep pipe operator. Let's drop NA. Now we're going to be using a variable called order. It's in our msleep data. So let me show us msleep. So this is the variable that we're working on. It's called order, and that's like the order of the animals. This carnivora, primates, rodentia, blah blah blah. So that's what we're going to work on. So we are still we're working on msleep database, data set, sorry. And then we have told R to drop the missing data here. And then we pipe it into, we pipe that into ggplot. So we go ahead and write our aesthetic, since we have already told R the data sets to work with. And then order. Then we put a plus sign, and then we tell R to give us a bar chart, Jumba. When we click Control Enter, you can see it has given us a bar chart of the order variable. Now you can see here in the names of the values, there are so many categories, there are so many levels. So the names are squeezed into each other. Now, if we want to correct that, there's a function we call chord flip. I'm going to add it here. So I put my plus here, and then I say chord flip. And what this does is it flips the x-axis to the y-axis. So if we run this command, you can see it has flipped the axis that was here up here. And now we have the names of the values written out neatly in a horizontal pattern like this, instead of the way it was squeezed into this axis before. Now, sometimes you might want to see an order in the way these bars are represented. And doing that, you can do your, okay, this session will end now in about 30 seconds. I will log us on in 5 minutes into another session so that we can continue from there. So thank you very much. I'll log us out now. Let's take a 5 minutes break, and then I'll log us in back. Thank you.